And last but not least, we have Bitoshi Blockamoto, creator of Bitmap. So give them a warm welcome.
I think it's, yeah, I score. Hey, 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 all right, get ready. This is gonna be sick. All right, cool. All right, it is 4, right? Perfect. How's everyone doing? Are you having fun at Ordinals Lisbon? Are you having fun at Ordinals Lisbon? That was fake, because I forced you to do it, admit it. Come on now. Hopefully this panel is going to be reflecting why we are all here. Why every single one of you cared to either leave whatever you were doing in your houses in Lisbon, or if you came from all across the world, we're going to talk a little bit about how each one of our actions reflect to the topic at hand, which is Bitcoin, the reality fabric. I have the honor right now of having amazing panelists here with me, some of my friends, some who have connected deeply over conversations on Telegram and hoping to get to know more. So why don't you guys introduce yourself for a minute? I'll come back, introduce myself, and then we'll get into the topic. So Sovereign, we'll start over with you, and then you guys can just pass it on, and we'll go that way.
Yeah, hey, thanks Taha for the introduction. I'm Sovereign, I'm founder of Control. At Control, we're creatives, we're technologists, but above all, we're fuck fiatologists. And yeah, that's what we're about, visceral culture on Bitcoin.
Thank you so much. My name is Zhixi. I work on the BD team from Bob. Bob stands for Build on Bitcoin. This is a Ethereum layer 2 that focus on Bitcoin innovation. So we call ourselves hybrid L2 because we're also a merge mind. I'm happy to get into more deeply why we call ourselves a hybrid layer 2. And very excited to be on this panel and talk about Bitcoin with you guys.
Hello, hello. I'm Bitoshi Blockamoto. I'm the creator of Bitmap. I wonder if any of you has Bitmap here? Any holders? Hey, Bitmap holders. Hello, hello, team. Yes, so Bitmap is basically metaverse on Bitcoin. It's a decentralized effort where we all come together to build a metaverse on Bitcoin, on layer 1. So that's the deal.
Amazing, amazing. So thank you for the intros, guys and girls. So my name is Taha Abbasi, as I was just introduced by Chris as well. I'm the co-creator of Ferrum Network, and I'm the CTO of Ferrum Labs. Also the co-creator of this amazing initiative. If you don't have a passport, make sure you get yourself one. We're giving one out to every single person. This wouldn't have happened without the support of Trevor, Sovereign, who's right here. We've got Nichelle, Studio Paiman, and tons of contributors who are part of my team sitting in the back, listed on the back of this passport here as well. But why are we here? We talked about that, right? So I think I want to set the stage with kind of describing something that I think Sovereign you can speak to very well, which is we hear on the news, we hear in our life every day that, oh, house prices are going up, college cost is going up, salaries are not going up as much, the cost of food is up, cost of gas is up. And we seem to just accept that as the reality of life, as much as you accept that you need to breathe to live. But we never question it. We're never taught to question it. And we're never taught that what are the puppeteered strings that are being pulled to present this reality to us. And hopefully we can connect that to why Bitcoin, the reality of fabric, is going to question, not only disrupt that, but already is becoming the new way forward. So Sovereign, you're going to talk a little bit about the money supply aspect and some things you're passionate about, and then we can kind of get into some other topics there.
Yeah, 100%. I think that people don't really understand what's happening with the Bitcoin price. People just get excited about the fact that the Bitcoin price is like, you know, yesterday the Bitcoin price went above 70K for a few minutes and everybody was just like, you know, giving high fives to each other and stuff. But if you think behind the scenes of what's happening there, the price of Bitcoin is actually an index of entropy. It measures other things that are breaking down in society. Look at gold. It's the oldest asset on the planet, and it's trading at all-time highs, $2,400, $2,500 an ounce. Think about that for a second. This is an asset that was traded when cavemen were walking on the planet, and price has never been so high. It's viewed as a flight to safety. And so something like the price of gold is telling you that people are concerned about global systemic failure. And the Bitcoin price is reflecting things like this. As things break, you will see those reflected in the Bitcoin price. To your point about inflation, do not buy what governments are selling you. Inflation is totally, totally out of control. What happens on the news is not reflective of what you are seeing on the street, in the supermarkets. Everybody is in debt to their eyeballs. They've been fed debt like crack cocaine all of these years. And now as interest rates go up, people are finding it very, very hard to live. And in these times, you need the hardest asset possible to preserve your wealth. And there is nothing that has been discovered or invented that is as hard of an asset as Bitcoin. And so at Control, we use culture as a Trojan horse or as an invitation to onboard people onto Bitcoin and get out of centralized finance currency and get off of fiat rails.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that will build kind of directly into what Zhixi with Bob is doing as well, and I think it kind of talks about, okay, this is a really difficult topic to talk about. It's a topic that most people find boring. When you start talking about money supply and inflation, you know, you're like zoning out, even though it should be important because it affects us all. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how building on Bitcoin can help perhaps the adoption of this technology that, of course, its core value happens to be, the essence of free, transparent, decentralized transfer of assets. But its adoption won't come unless people want to use it. So talk to us a little bit about how you align with that mission and what you're interested in.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really amazing, I think, transition, what you mentioned from the context of why we use Bitcoin to why adopting Bitcoin. So first, I want to second your point on why Bitcoin matters. I'm reading this book from Jeff Booth recently, and I think probably a lot of you have seen it before. He argued a point about technology being the driving force of our generation, where the essence of technology is supposed to bring deflation. Everything is supposed to be cheaper. Like a computer chip that would cost like $1 million to produce decades ago now costs like 2 cents or 5 cents, like nothing. So, but why is everything still becoming more and more expensive? Because the power of finance is not in our hand. It's central bank. And Bitcoin provides, basically after the financial crash, Bitcoin become one of the solutions for people, and that's why cryptocurrency and all of these things that we do exist now. And what I think is really relevant to the conference today and our panel today is, Bitcoin was not widely adopted because it's hard to use. There's a lot of technical barrier for normal people to understand. There's a lot of cultural barrier for people to challenge, the way that they used to use money. And also maybe finance is just not enough because most people don't even understand what finance is. So positioning Bitcoin as only a financial tool was probably not enough for the adoption. And this is why I think ordinals and inscriptions becoming a thing since last year really drove adoption and make Bitcoin a much more bullish turn than before. Because now with people being able to put data on chain, being able to do interesting things like what you guys are building here with like metaverse on Bitcoin, gaming on Bitcoin, all of a sudden Bitcoin is a little bit more than just a representation of value. There are things that you can actually do on chain. And like I represent Bob here. Bob is not a Bitcoin chain. It's not UTXO. It's an Ethereum chain. And so for us, what is very interesting is to observe what is limited on the base chain. We were just having a conversation earlier. There's a lot more things that you can do on the Bitcoin base chain now with the appearance of inscription, but it's not everything, because when we look at other ecosystems, there's so much that you can do on Ethereum, on Solana, on all of these other ecosystems, and people are adopting it, people are using it. So our job here is to find out the gap and find the ways to bridge those gaps so more people can start to understand and start to think about things in Bitcoin standards, to buy things in terms of sats rather than US dollars. And that become an entry point for people to actually make the decision of downloading a UTXO wallet and transition from L2 to L1.
Wow, very well put. I love that you talked about that the the story of Bitcoin is being told by Ordinals, and I love how you're connecting the transition of the EVM ecosystems. And I think it really relates to what we believe at Ferrum as well. We started 6 years ago with a mission to try to build technology solutions and relationships, connections, and collaborations that can slowly remove barriers to the mass adoption of Web3 at large, because that cause, Satoshi Nakamoto's cause, is a great enough cause to unite all of us. It's not any one of our cause, it's all of our cause. And I think if we all kind of get behind that spirit of collaboration over competition, I think my friend Surya Paiman likes to preach that a lot. So I think that spirit is incredible. And especially when you mentioned that centralized, the inflation control is centralized. It's not that it's out of control, it's centralized. I think that's really exciting. And I think with Seize Control, you're doing an incredible job of, as I mentioned earlier, finance is a boring topic, but sharing the culture of how you can share these things in an exciting way. We have a funeral that happened downstairs. So why don't we come to you, Bitoshi, and talk to us about this concept of BitAmp. I knew about them, and then you shared your Git book, and then I geeked out. I'm a developer. I started looking into them, like, holy smokes, what I have been missing. I should have dived deep into this a lot longer ago. So for the rest of the folks that are in here that want to know a little bit more, tell us about how that relates into Satoshi's mission, maybe how that relates into the new reality fabric that we're trying to create here.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the fabric of Bitcoin, the fabric of the metaverse, I see it as the blockchain. I see the blockchain as the Higgs boson of the metaverse. That's the way I see it. It gives mass. Satoshi's is value. It's a way. It's our human energy exchanged on chain, and the blocks are a representation of that. And the concept of bitmap is essentially to transmute that energy. Every receipt, every block on the chain can be transmuted into a spatial field. So, we have blocks dating back to 2008, 840,000 blocks, 850 now. And each one is a potential world. So the data on it is persistent, it exists forever, and if you really understand the true definition of a metaverse, the real definition is that it's persistent and that it lasts forever. And what other asset is there in the world that, other than Bitcoin, that does that? Yeah, so that's why I believe in proof of work, why I believe in metaverse on Bitcoin, and yeah, it's very simple. It's very simple. It's literally just you inscribe your number.bitmap, and if you were the first person to do that, the number represents a block height, then you are the owner of that block, or what we call a district in the bitmap universe. Ownership is a strong word, but yeah, in the land of bitmap, you are the person who wins the claim. Yeah, and we launched on June the 1st last year, and 800 or 750-ish thousand blocks were inscribed out in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks, which I thought it would never inscribe out. I thought it would be like, we'd be going for years and years before we ever got to that point, but here we are.
I love that. And you want to talk a little bit about how, I think specifically what really attracted me is the scarcity of it, similar to, rarity of sats and commonality of sats, how this is specifically only accessible. You can't go buy them. You can't just go generate them per block. You have to, and there's a competition now, and people trying to secure a block in order to create. I guess you talk about ownership being a tricky word. Well, how about their identity? Our stories, as Ordinals tells the story of Bitcoin, does this tell a part of your story? Because you're now associated with a block that just got mined, and now you have your presence in BitAmp with it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's right. Every block is a potential for a story to be told. It's a potential world. And not only that, the mapping of Bitcoin itself is a project that I think is really important. I think actually turning the Bitcoin blockchain into a map, that's why we call it bitmap, is a big deal. It takes, and there's many different ways you can do it. You can turn each block into a galaxy. You can turn it into, a district similar to Sandbox Land or Voxels or any other previous metaverse. And there's so many different examples of that already. because it's a decentralized effort. Anybody can build on Bitmap. There's no central team, which I think is really important because it mirrors Satoshi's vision, and it's essentially taking Satoshi's vision forward into the metaverse.
I love that. I love that. I think one of the questions that you presented as well, as we were talking about what are the topics that we can share with people, was what areas of value can Bitcoin absorb. I think that kind of comes from understanding why Ethereum has historically built only in the EVM and Solana, Algorand, Cardano ecosystem, even though we started off with Bitcoin. Bitcoin kind of had a full circle. It was always a dominant chain, but the story was kind of in the background. If people were really interested in it, were really supporting it. So how do they get the masses to support the mother chain? I think that coming full circle is very interesting to me. In fact, we have some of your artists featured in this Ordinals Passport as well. And the passport, the story of the passport kind of relates to how we're kind of trying to bring more liquidity over to Bitcoin, how we're trying to tell Bitcoin's story. In fact, Penny right here, his art, if you look at it, he's actually stealing the profile picture of your passport, right? So Bitoshi, you might appreciate that because we hear about identity theft, but what this is a concept of identity saved. And it's taking our individual identity, sure, you get to keep that, no one else gets to have that. And it brings the concept of we are all Satoshi. It brings some very, very different builders, very, very different artists to come together and share about a mission that they believe in. So I think that ability for Bitcoin to unite folks who are building an interoperability protocol, folks who are trying to communicate the message and importance of the demise of fiat, and folks who are trying to create the metaverse concept, and folks who are trying to bridge what they have built and are building in the world of Ethereum. I think this is very exciting to come over. Even the VRF numbers in this passport are generated by Chainlink, even though it's an Ordinals passport. So combining EVM and our ecosystems. So talk to me about how all of what's happened after Casey launched Ordinals. Why are you bullish that Bitcoin can capture some of the value from L2s? Maybe Sovereign, you can start off and anyone can pick up on that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that Bitcoin's going to swallow everything. It's, the reason why the Bitcoin price is where it is not particularly because of Ordinals, it's because of what's happening in the background world. It's, I've been trading long enough to know that when financial crises happen, they happen incredibly fast. 97 Asian financial crisis happened within the space of days, right? Like any crisis that you can imagine, it happens very, very quickly, and it's incredibly, incredibly urgent to onboard people very, very fast. And we're very lucky in this room. We know what Ordinals are. We know what Sats are. We know what UTXOs are. I saw the gentleman over there buy a bear with Satoshis, which was fucking amazing. It's like, but we're a very, very small minority. And in order to onboard the masses, we have to make people feel something. It's like you have to get the message of Bitcoin across and you have to make them respond. That's why we're at Control, we call ourselves feel something specialists. Think about the first time you fell in love. Think about your first crush. Think about your first child if you have them. That is the way that people resonate with that feeling. You have to make them feel the importance of what's coming and make them realize what's rolling out. And so that bridge that you build will actually bring the masses across. And in terms of absorbing value, the global bond market is $111 trillion. The global equity market is another $100 trillion. People are out here talking about 100K Bitcoin. It's like make your imagination much bigger. This is nothing. I think Bitcoin will absorb value from default centralized financial system in a way that people really don't quite understand and are not being imaginative enough.
I love that. I would love for you guys to chime in on that, and as well as, with the L2 conversation happening, there's obviously a lot of L2s in other ecosystems, so do Bitcoin L2s have a chance to be perhaps having more of the market share across? Because obviously Sovereign talked about with the overall market system, but I would also encourage you to share perhaps the feeling concept. I remember my first pizza sat that I secured. That means a lot to me. I remember when I got my first Ninja that was inscribed on a pizza sat. Those feelings as it relates to Bitcoin, they become part of your story. My connections with Trevor, how the Pizza Ninja community is able to sit with you and come together and not just talk about always building, but also how to have fun, how to live your life. So that message becomes part of your story as well. So maybe share a little bit of your perspective, and also maybe it would be interesting to see what were your memories with Bitcoin or Ordinals or the general ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are so many points I want to echo one by one. The first one is when I think we kind of all touched on the point about the community effect or the network effect of Bitcoin, how people share common belief and come here all the way to Lisbon and sit in one room to talk about this one thing. And I'm a big fan of the network state vision, where in the future there is a possibility that people identify themselves in terms of the value and the common digital currencies that they use online. Maybe they actually identify themselves belonging in a group with legitimate credit from being in a Discord group rather than where they're from, where they were born. And I think this is kind of what Bitcoin is taking us right now. Like, especially even within Bitcoin, we see people identifying themselves as like the new wave of Bitcoiners or the older wave of Bitcoiners. And this is because all of the points that we mentioned about how we have consensus on, like traditional finance and the flaws of the system of the real world that we're living in. And in terms of absorbing value, I think this is a very tricky terms because we can see absorbing value from like the financial market as a whole, like absorbing cryptocurrency, absorbing value from fiat system, or we can think about it in terms of Bitcoin absorbing value from other currencies. And I have very different thoughts on these two topics. So from like the general one, for the first one, which is cryptocurrency, Bitcoin absorbing value and attention from the traditional fiat world, I think that's certain, because especially in the past few years with all of these black swan events happening, people losing trust or people getting just more educated about what the world is, how money works, it's like we are seeing the number. People are buying cryptocurrencies. And my personal actually entry to crypto was not through Bitcoin, actually, it was through stablecoin, because I had my own business and I was dealing with currency in US dollar, in Chinese yuan, in different currencies, and I realized USDT is a much better tool than my whatever IBAN or whatever. Like, I saved so much more money from that. So I actually got introduced to Bitcoin through USDT rather than Bitcoin itself. And this is where I lead to the second point about absorbing value within the this echo chamber. Like of course I am biased because I work for Bob, which is Ethereum L2, but we have been in the space for a lot of years, and we learned it harder. We tried everything. We look at the Bitcoin from its core, and we understand, okay, for a normie, if I want to onboard my mom to use Bitcoin tomorrow, and for her to understand what is UTXO, this is going to take me years, and it might not even worth the effort for her to do it. But for me to onboard her, to get her download a MetaMask wallet and understand how to use it is a lot more simple. And this is where things tie in. Like, I want to see more people who have the same kind of user journey as I did, where I started to understand how blockchain work and how, like cryptocurrency, what cryptocurrency means, what permissionless means, what, managing your own seed phrase means. Not necessarily have to through from one specific cryptocurrency, but from a use case. Because I think this is what is super important for our builders to understand is it's not about which currency you like, but it's about what problem you solve. So for us, we try to focus on what use cases can actually drive adoption. What use cases are actually solving the problem that people have, either in the real world or in the metaverse. And then the bigger picture is how do we move towards network state and have actual communities and government that is owned by ourselves.
No, I love that. I think that concept of sort of absorbing the experience of how do you make it simple to onboard a user. You talked about onboarding your mom, and I do agree. Onboarding to Bitcoin is definitely has a higher level of barrier. But I think what's really cool now is that conversation is changing to how do we make it simpler. I think that's where this collaboration comes into play, where if you connect with Jan and what Xverse is doing, what's exciting now, even MetaMask is looking into onboarding Bitcoin. They announced recently where they're going to start to enable those things. And we're looking to integrate Xverse into the EVM ecosystem, where we want to make runes and ordinals in general accessible and tradable one click in other ecosystems. So I guess we're coming into closing time. I would like to share what closing thoughts do you have on some of these topics. And then I do want to actually tell the audience as well that as part of the Ordinals Passport Initiative, we're giving 2 free tickets to the Ordinals Yacht Party that's happening on the 30th. So if you share something, take a picture, share this, tag the panelists here, and share what is your story, maybe what you felt about what was shared here, what inspired you. We'll select 2 of you to come to the yacht party with some of the folks here and the folks that completed quests. But what in your opinion will be your message to people to say you should go learn about Bitcoin, you should go learn about the metaverse in your case, and maybe each one of you can share your aspects as well in the last few minutes.
Yeah, so I see Bitmap as an onboarding mechanism to Bitcoin. So to understand Bitmap is to understand Bitcoin, because it mirrors Bitcoin pretty much one-to-one. A district is a block, a parcel is a transaction. Very simple concept. And once you touch on it, it's like a flower. It explodes into a total understanding of what this whole thing is, because you see it not just as financial receipts of what happened. You see it as a whole entire universe in front of you. So yeah, that's what I say is just go and look at Bitmap, go and look at what people are doing with it, look at the different ways that people are interpreting it, and just think about it. Think about Bitcoin yourself. Like, what does that look like in your head? Because there's so many different ways you can take it, and it's a collaboration between all of us. It's not a central party that's making this. I came up with the standard. I showed people what it was, and the inscription standard. But beyond that, it's all of us.
I love that. So use Bitmap to understand Bitcoin. It was so simply explained. That's a really interesting take. So Zhixi, why don't you tell us about Bob? I know you mentioned a little bit, but what's your closing message for folks to get inspired and maybe look into and maybe build something as well that may integrate these communities?
I just have 3 words. Guess what? Build on Bitcoin.
Very nice. Sovereign?
Yeah, I would just say that it's the collective responsibility of everybody in this room to urgently onboard people. It is far more urgent than you think. It's going to happen faster than people realize, so it is our urgent responsibility to onboard people. But what I would say is, and I'm going to borrow a phrase from my friend Emmanuel in the back of the room, who's actually wearing the shirt. He was on our spaces the other day, and he said something that blew my mind. Actually, the whole thing went viral. But he said this thing, and it's so true. If you bet against Bitcoin, you bet against humanity with a U, okay? And make it simple, make people feel something, make them understand the true importance of Bitcoin in ways that really resonate with people and make them jump out of their seat. And that's how you actually onboard the next million people. It's not about talking about the technical aspects and all of this other stuff that can come later, but make people feel something. You find it very successful in terms of onboarding people like we have at Control.
I love that. I love that you bet against Bitcoin, you bet against humanity. In closing thoughts, I'd just like to acknowledge and sort of take a moment to realize that everybody on here, the folks that are putting this together, this is our life's mission. We're not doing it for the next shiny object syndrome. Even when we do things like share the message here and get a chance to win 2 free tickets to a yacht, that's not just a gimmick. We are trying to encourage you to share what you feel can inspire others to also come join us to build this future that we all hope will give power to us and not just to centralized entities. So I encourage you to look at each one of the speakers and their projects, to follow them on X and Twitter, to join their Discord communities, and to share maybe what you're excited about when you learn about those projects. With that, we'll wrap this up. Thank you everyone for coming up here.
Thanks, Taha. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.